This video is not intended for children.
Hello everyone. Our topic this week was requested by Travis Herndon. We'll be going over Alduin from Skyrim. Spoilers ahead for Skyrim. Le deux.
So, Alduin is the primary antagonist of the Skyrim game. He's also a dragon. But not just any dragon. He's like the Dracula of dragons. Dragons, as a rule, are powerful creatures in the Elder Scrolls universe, the game series of which Skyrim is a part. They come in a variety of flavors and power levels, but they all share some distinct traits. First, they're giant flying lizards with all of the physical power that one could assume comes along with having such a body. But they're also highly intelligent, capable of wielding magic, and have a power called the Voice that was originally theirs alone. On top of all of this, dragons are nearly immortal. Many life forms in the Elder Scrolls world were created by various gods. The dragons are believed to be the children of Akatosh, who, by one name or another, is recognized as the head of most deific pantheons throughout the world. Often represented as a dragon and with the influence over the sphere of time. Resultantly, the dragons, as some of his earliest, some say they were his first children, are nearly immortal. They can live seemingly forever. They do not suffer from old age as mortal races do, as far as scholars can tell. They also don't reproduce, or at least not in the conventional mortal sense, with no evidence of young offspring having ever been recorded. In a very real sense, dragons are timeless. Their bodies can be slain, but their souls live on, allowing for resurrection shenanigans as seen in Skyrim, which we'll touch on later. All in all, they are incredibly powerful beings.
Alduin is considered by many to be the first dragon, and whether or not that claim is true, he is indisputably the most powerful dragon in the Skyrim game, and if the stories are to be believed, the most powerful dragon ever to have lived. Thousands of years before the start of the game, various animal cults throughout the world venerated different animals as great spirits and even gods. Chiefest among these natural animals were the dragons. The dragons in general took to this worship readily, as most considered themselves to be clearly superior to the mortal races, as even the longest living among the mortals was still a sputtering candle in the dark compared to a dragon's endless potential lifespan. And indeed, by the time of the rise of these dragon cults, all known dragons were truly ancient already. Alduin was a king amongst the dragons, the greatest of their number, a god among gods from the perspective of the mortals, and as such was the dragon's leader. This remained the status quo for some time, until eventually scales tipped, and the mortal races rebelled against the dragons and their dragon priests, mortals who worked directly for the dragons, enforcing their will, managing tribute, etc. For more information on the dragon priests, check out our previous video on them here. In response to this rebellion, Alduin ordered that the short-lived mortals be crushed, that their resistance was to be routed, and no mercy was to be shown. Obligatory fuck.
At this point, Alduin's second-in-command, Parthenox, at the behest of one of the gods, turned on Alduin, siding with the mortal races, and began teaching them how to use the power of the voice. His motivation, in part, coming from a belief that Alduin was getting a bit too full of himself, as Alduin had declared himself a god in truth. Indeed, the Nords, natives of Skyrim, consider Alduin to be the god of destruction, hailed and feared within their deific pantheon. Which didn't sit well with Parthenox, so he began to teach mortals how to harness the power of the voice. The voice was a power the dragons had mastered long ago. The dragon's very language had inherent power, and, when exercised properly, could generate magical effects ranging from the comparatively mundane, such as a blast of kinetic force, fire breath, etc., all the way up to conjuring storms that rained flaming meteors from the sky. The voice, or the Thuum, as it is called in the dragon tongue, was the primary advantage that dragons had over mortals, as, up until Parthenox's betrayal, it was the one ability only the dragons themselves had access to. Dragons were physically powerful, sure, but many other creatures were strong or in hordes could overcome the strength of a lone dragon. Dragons are capable of normal magic, certainly, but many of the mortal races were also skilled in the realms of magic. The voice was the one power, and it was a big one, that belonged to the dragons alone.
The teaching of the voice to mortals helped turn the tide of the war Alduin had launched in his enemy's favor. But even so, no mortal, even with the power of the voice, could match Alduin himself. He was simply too powerful, with strength well beyond that of an average dragon, both physically and mystically. So, 3 exceptional Nord heroes banded together and came up with a plan. The voice is used in combat through shouts, mystical incantations in the dragon tongue that create a magical effect. These 3 heroes got together and created an entirely new shout, the Dragonrend. In lore, the idea of the shout is that when a dragon is affected by Dragonrend, they are, likely for both the first and last time, forced to experience and truly understand the concept of mortality. As normally eternal creatures, this idea is foreign to dragons. It's part of why so many of them readily took to being worshipped as gods by these lesser, mortal creatures. The idea of dying after a few decades or even centuries because your body simply gave out was the sort of thing that a dragon could understand academically, but not truthfully. The Dragonrend shout internalized its concept deep into a dragon's mind and soul, making them understand the idea in a way that was, quite possibly, impossible without the aid of this shout. This realization of mortality is so shocking for dragons that it makes it difficult to function and focus. Game mechanically, this shout does 2 things. For all dragons, it forces them out of the sky, the explanation being that the effort of flight takes too much concentration and willpower for a dragon to muster under the mental and spiritual assault of the Dragonrend effect, leaving them much more easily assailable by their enemies. Additionally, Alduin is so powerful that game mechanically, under normal circumstances, he is literally immune to harm. Dragonrend is the only way to render Alduin vulnerable to damage at all. He is still powerful, but in a very real way, Dragonrend makes Alduin mortal in a way he could never be without the shout's effects. These 3 heroes had developed a shout with a single purpose: to slay the King of the Dragons.
The heroes then put a plan into action. They launched an assault on the dragons with the intent of drawing Alduin out and slaying him once and for all. One of them brought along a backup plan, a plan discussed by the heroes prior to their attack, but deemed too dangerous for actual use by the other 2. Luckily for them, the last hero was stubborn and brought it along anyway, reasoning that if their plan went well, it wouldn't be needed, and if things didn't go according to plan, it would be their only hope. Initially, things seemed to be going well. The heroes slew half a dozen dragons just waiting to catch Alduin's attention. And when he finally attacked, each of the heroes used the power of the voice and hit him with Dragonrend. Alduin was shocked, weakened, rendered vulnerable for quite possibly the first time in his life. But it turned out that it wasn't enough. Alduin quickly slew one of the heroes, and the other 2 agreed that their backup plan was now their only hope. So, while one hero valiantly distracted Alduin in combat, the other withdrew and began to exercise the power of an Elder Scroll. Elder Scrolls are among the most powerful artifacts in the Elder Scrolls universe, as you might have guessed, since the series is named after them. Usually, they're just profoundly accurate prophetic texts which require a lot of training and will to read without going mad or blind immediately. However, one of the heroes had figured out a way to use this particular Elder Scrolls relation to time itself, a trait all Elder Scrolls share, as a weapon. Using the scroll, Alduin was cast out of their time into a sort of temporal vortex, banishing him from the world. Now it's said that the hero's hope was that Alduin would be lost in time forever. But considering the hero who used the scroll uttered a setting-friendly, "May God have mercy on our souls," statement immediately after their success, it seems likely that at least he knew what he had done.
You see, realistically, what the heroes had done was save their world by passing the buck down the line. Alduin was pulled out of the world, saving it, as without their leader, the dragons were systematically hunted down and rendered nearly extinct. But Alduin was ejected back into the world a few thousand years later, which is when the events of the Skyrim game take place. Ironically, one of Alduin's first acts, once he was back in reality, would save the life of the player, the character who would ultimately be responsible for Alduin's defeat and death. Alduin hates mortals with a deep, burning passion, a hatred only made worse by his time in the temporal vortex. So, when he found himself back in the world he knew, his first acts were those of wanton destruction upon the mortals in his immediate vicinity. And it just so happened that one of the villages he set ablaze in his initial rampage was hosting a series of executions. The player's head was literally on the chopping block when Alduin appeared seemingly from nowhere and began raining fire from the sky, allowing the player to escape with their life. In the time between his banishment and his return, prophecies were written concerning Alduin, some vaguely referring to a time when he would return, others speaking of him devouring the world in his wrath upon his return, hence one of his titles, Alduin the World Eater. And upon his return to the world, Alduin set up and got down to business. First, he traveled the length and breadth of Skyrim, finding the corpses of his fallen dragon brethren and reviving them, bringing dragons back into the world in force, sending his minions to wreak havoc upon the world.
What he didn't count on was the player. The player was a Dragonborn, a rare being said to be born with the immortal soul of a dragon but the body of a mortal. This dichotomy granted the Dragonborn two unique powers important to combating Alduin. First, a Dragonborn's dragon soul allowed them an instinctive and deep grasp of the power of the voice. Where normal mortals required years of study and practice to learn a single word, a Dragonborn could learn various shouts in minutes, the knowledge being absorbed instinctively with little to no instruction required. Just as importantly for the being that would become Alduin's archenemy, the player could absorb the soul of any dragon that it slew, essentially killing the dragon permanently while also empowering their own ability to use the voice.
So, while Alduin raised dragons from the dead, the player followed in his wake, perma-killing those same dragons while pursuing Alduin himself before the Dragon King could wreck everything. Eventually, the player encounters Parthenox, Alduin's traitorous second-in-command, who was still alive and still teaching the ways of the voice to those he deemed worthy. Working together, the player and Parthenox tracked down the Elder Scroll once used to banish Alduin to the current time. Using it, the player was able to watch the final battle between the heroes and Alduin, watching as Alduin was cast out of time, and more importantly, learning the Dragonrend shout, which had been lost to time in the process. The player now had a weapon which could harm Alduin.
Which was good, because by that point, Alduin had tracked Parthenox down, and with the player there, he planned to slay them both, ending two of his most persistent enemies simultaneously. Unfortunately for Alduin, with the player having just acquired Dragonrend, you are able to render him vulnerable to damage. A sensation he remembers and doesn't like. After a fierce battle, Alduin retreats, badly wounded, but he's not planning on taking that beating lying down. Instead, he figures out how to travel to Sovengaard, an afterlife specifically reserved for the honored warrior dead of the Nord people. Once there, he conjures up a confusing mist in which he waits and hides, using it to shield him while he hunts the souls of the honored dead, devouring them in order to regain his strength. Yeesh. It took a while, but eventually the player follows Alduin into Sovengaard. There, they band together with the souls of the three heroes who punted Alduin into the player's time. Together, the four of them engaged in a final battle with Alduin, who, by then, had effectively regained his strength. But, between the heroes and the player, Alduin's strength finally broke. His corpse left broken on the soil of this realm of the afterlife. Interestingly, the player does not absorb Alduin's soul. Instead, it seems to siphon off into the ether, leaving some to believe that when the time is right and the end days come, Alduin will return and live up to his prophetic name, World Eater.
And that's basically Alduin, the most powerful dragon from the Elder Scrolls series. We hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave us a like and maybe share it with someone you know might like it. If you have ideas for a video you'd like to see us do in the future, do like Travis Herndon and let us know in the comments down below. If you'd like to see more videos from us in the future, be they lore, let's play, or other, go ahead and hit that subscribe button.
In the meantime, this has been
True Masters and Morons,
signing off. Thanks for watching this video. If you'd like to see more like it, hit that subscribe orb.
To see our last Let's Play, click or tap the link on the right.
For our last lore video, click the link on the left.
Thank you to all of our patrons for making these videos possible.
Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.